Him we proclaim, admonishing everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone mature in Christ. These are the words of the Apostle Paul, sent by Jesus to make mature disciples for Jesus. The Group Chat podcast exists to make disciples who love Jesus, His church, and His world. Welcome.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Group Chat podcast. This is Pastor James hosting today, and I'm joined by Pastor Doug Ponder.
Heyo.
I'm also joined by Pastor Josh Rowland.
Yes, sir.
And last, and certainly not least,
Wow. Yes,
Pastor Bryan Lockwood.
I'm glad to be here.
We're
Yes.
glad that you're here.
Certainly.
I don't
Verily.
sense any
I know we got to bring
sarcasm
back
in
the
that.
biblical double, Doug. Why do you say to me,
Oh, wow.
Sometimes we got to do it. Wow, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so we've been traversing through the doctrine of
Like
God.
triplets, though. Cool.
Cool.
Holy.
Yeah. We'll sort it out on a different episode.
Yeah. We'll chase that on an obscure episode.
All right, so we're continuing to work through our doctrine of God, and we've been looking at His attributes and who He is and what He's like. We're also going to talk a lot about what God does, what God has done, and one of the most significant things that God has done is that He has created. Even when we look at the Scriptures don't start like a systematic theology. God has revealed Himself to the prophets, and this is what He has to say about who He is and His attributes. But rather, the first words of the Scriptures are, "In the beginning, God created." And so, why is that an important place to start? Why is it significant that our Scriptures start as a story about God creating a world?
Wow. So many things to say. One, it puts everything, period, after the beginning in its proper context. Everything that flows after the beginning, all the way to the end. Even the beginning assumes an end. So the end is intrinsic from the beginning, and that everything is infused with the purposes of the Creator. Mm-hmm. If there is a God and He's created, then that is henceforth where all meaning is derivative. And so it really does inform every single molecule, atom, aspect, happening, occurrence. Everything in life flows out of rightly understanding in the beginning God created.
Yeah.
Significant.
To your point, think about every time somebody picks up their phone, whether they have a smartphone or dumb phone or a wise phone. They have those now.
Do they really?
Yeah, absolutely they do.
Wise phone.
Yeah, so it's a
We'll
phone.
see.
It's a
about
phone
that.
that has access to things like maps and.
I thought the beginning of
every
wisdom
phone.
was the fear of the Lord.
But it's
I feel like
it's
the wisdom's probably what they leave out.
That's correct. So it leaves out a lot of the things that on the phone that would give you the ability to access stuff that's not good to your soul, not good for your soul. So anyway, regardless of what kind of phone you've got, the point is that phone was designed, it was made by somebody, which means it has specific features that were built in from the beginning.
Right.
There are things it can do because of who made it and what they made it for, but there's lots of things it cannot do. My phone cannot fly. It just can't. It never will be able to. And so the limitations that are built in, right, as well, all of this is part of the design that was built into it from the beginning. And so if you think about the world in the same way, just to even have a world and to read in the first verse of the Bible, God made this world, you're already supposed to be thinking, how did He make it? Why did He make it?
That's right.
What is its purpose? Why are we here? Mm-hmm. And then the story will go on to answer all those questions that are even anticipated from the first verse of the Bible.
It would be a very fun exercise to get the phrase, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth" out and see just how many questions that one phrase answers. Is the earth eternal? Like, has matter always been around forever and ever? No, in the beginning. Oh, so we had a beginning. Okay. In the beginning, God. Oh, well, there's somebody distinct from this creation who's on the scene and at work and seems to be a personal person. Okay, in the beginning, God created. Oh, He created us. We're not an accident. We didn't just somehow come out of the primordial ooze. Like He made us on purpose.
Neither is there a pantheon of gods. There's not a sun god and a moon god.
Yeah.
And that's not as common of a thought in our day, but that is in the context that Genesis was being written, that actually was a pretty common, this kind of pagan worship of all kinds of different gods, and then even in the Greco-Roman period, all that kind of stuff. And so what we're saying is not in the beginning the gods, or in the beginning lots of different forces, to your point, but in the beginning God. There's one God who created all of these things because He has all power and everything flows from Him. Some people refer to the creature creator distinction. This is kind of piggybacking off what you said a second ago, Doug, that I know we're not on doctrine of man, we're talking about the doctrine of God here, but it is like it tells us what we are, what we're for, and in relation to, and it can only be in relation to who God is and what He's done. And so because everything flows from that, it just clarifies everything else.
And it also means that everything that is created.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just it's not just an occurrence. It's not just a thing. It's not just material without a purpose. Yeah, there's a purposefulness behind every single thing in the world because it was crafted.
Mm-hmm.
It was planning went into it.
It could have been something else.
It could have been something
and God
else.
decided it wouldn't be something else.
Right. And that's significant. Think of the antithesis. I mean, if you're left without there's a God who created and therefore everything is a part of His creation, then essentially you have purposelessness, gratuity. Gratuitousness is just purposeless.
Which is where the world finds itself.
Right.
Which leads to all kinds of chaos in a million different ways because you don't understand what people are, you don't understand what we're for, and because God, again, it's all connected, not just mechanically, if you don't understand what you're for, you can't live the way you're intended to. It's not just that, even though that's true. It's also because you're created for God and you live like He's not there, you will then be depressed, purposeless, there won't be drive,
meaninglessness.
Meaningless. It's exactly.
Think too about Peter Jones. Remember his book? Was it One or Two?
Yep.
Seeing a World of Difference. Right. He a brilliant book with really important concepts, but it's super nerdy. Right. So he talks about oneism. He talks about twoism. And
only mathematicians love that book.
That kind of language, right? It's pretty special.
I actually loved it, to be honest.
It's a great book.
Cult math to oneism and twoism.
Yes,
There
sir.
it is, 1 and 2.
But what he's
consistent.
talking about,
It's
what he was
consistent.
talking about was if some of the world religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, New Age spiritualities, or even evolutionary thought, if those views of the world were correct, then everything is just part of one thing.
One thing,
And that means at a deep and important philosophical worldview level that there are no real distinctions between you and an animal, or between you and whatever God supposedly shares this life with you. And as a result, if there are no distinctions, then to act as if there are distinctions would be incorrect. And so the goal within these worldview systems would be to dissolve any of the distinctions that we can find. And actually, you find people who are clever enough to see what their worldview is teaching, to try to be consistent. Was it Peter Singer, right? Was he Princeton? Is that where he was for a number of years?
So.
One of the world's
bioethicist.
leading atheist ethicists. And he said, at the end of the day, there's no difference between a toddler and a chicken. And in fact, I think because a chicken might have consciousness, awareness of its life before a toddler does, it might be wrong to eat eggs, but it would not be wrong to kill a child before the age of 3 because the child has no knowledge of its own being and existence. And he's trying to
And
be
this is not like an obscure ethicist either.
No,
It's not like
he's one of the
some
America's
kook.
leading ethicists, right? And so now, thankfully, most people don't go there. But the thing is, he's actually being consistent.
That's
being
correct.
consistent.
They're
with
not
his
going
worldview.
there. That's right.
And the same's true with Hinduism and all these other religions. Like, they're just looking around saying, well, there's no real difference between me and you and God. We're all actually one thing, and any differences are illusions. And that creates all kinds of chaos and inability to talk about right and wrong. But the Bible starts with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you get two things. There's God, and then there's everything else. There's God, and then there's not God, which means distinctions are built in from the beginning, and therefore it's not our goal to eviscerate distinctions between men and women, animals and people. I mean, animals and human beings, and God and us. Rather, it's our ability, it's supposed to be our job to discover the distinctions God built in from the beginning.
Steward them well.
And
cultivate.
steward them
That's
well,
right.
live into them, and all of that kind of thing.
Hey guys, Pastor James here. Group Chat Podcast is a ministry of Remnant Church in Richmond, Virginia. Remnant Church recently launched our 1 million in 1 year campaign to fund the purchase of properties that will serve as ministry space, a third location for worship, as well as classrooms for New City Academy. If you are a member of Remnant Church, remember to be praying about how to dig deep and joyfully and sacrificially give to the 1 million in 1 year campaign. Even if you aren't a member, if you have benefited from the Group Chat podcast or have been blessed by the ministry of Remnant Church, consider partnering with us by contributing to the 1 million in 1 year campaign. To find out more, check out some videos of what God has been doing in our midst, and to make your pledge, click on the link in the show notes.
This is always directly related to our satisfaction as well. This is why you have folks in a functionally atheistic, whether they affirm atheism or not, but essentially says there is no God who created, and there's no intrinsic meaning that He is instilled in creation, and therefore they in a dissatisfied way try to truncate their definition of satisfaction to life's mere happenings, their mere occurrences. So it's much more of a laissez-faire approach to life and trying to find meaning in life, your meaning. But ultimately, we know that's futile and it does not satisfy because it's not, we know we're lying to ourselves the entire time because someone like Singer is actually being consistent. If there is no God, then all things are possible. There is no God, then there is no meaning, and therefore really is what my friends let me get away with.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the old ethicist at UVA for a long time, Richard Rorty. He said, truth is what my friends let me get away with, which is an amazing way to look at it. And essentially, that's what you're left with if God had not created and actually has infused meaning to everything. It's the world is dissatisfying.
That's funny. He's taking it, so Singer's taking it farther than most people would, and then he's taking it farther than Singer would to show him the logical conclusion of all of that stuff. It just collapses in on itself.
Yeah, so the beginning of the scriptures start with a very potent, powerful, meaningful phrase that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But the story doesn't stop there, and we get a very beautiful but limited picture of the creation event in Genesis 1. And so when we preach through Genesis, we said that the creation account is not interested in answering all possible questions, but that it answers the important questions. So how do we sort out what are the important questions that need to be answered when we look at the creation account that it supplies answers for? Maybe ones that are maybe less important, ones that maybe Christians can have differences of opinion about because the scriptures don't fund those answers to the same degree.
Without answering that question, let me just say something that I think demonstrates why what you just said is exactly the right way to think about it. Bryan and I had a professor at seminary. You're welcome.
Good job, James. Good job.
I live to host another day.
I agree. You live to host another day. Bryan and I had a professor in seminary who said something one time in class that stopped me in my tracks. He said, the Bible's not an answer book. But that's exactly how I thought of it. I'd read loads of books that were basically like answers for all your questions and that kind of thing. And he said the Bible's
There's
not
answers in Genesis.
Yeah, there's loads of Christian ministries, right?
That
kind of thing.
Sorry about that.
And he says the Bible's not an answer book, by which he meant it's not the kind of book that's interested in answering every single question that you come up with. Right? There's all kinds of questions we come up with that at the end of the day, not that important, and the Bible's not all that interested in answering. Instead, he said, the Bible is a question and answer book. It shows you the questions that you should be asking, if you had enough wisdom to ask the right questions, and then it answers those.
That's good.
And that's exactly what we see, not just in Genesis 1, but really throughout the rest of the Bible. And so
What's a great point. Even to your point, the Bible is actually God's creation. So this part of his creation, he's spoken in through his word, and therefore his word is perfect as he's given it for everything that he intends for it to accomplish. Well, to your point, we wrongly sometimes, especially in our scientific age of the last couple hundred years, 200 or 300 years, we come to it as if it's offering some type of taxonomy of classifications and following some type of logic chemistry formula of exactly laying out how did God do it. Tell me exactly how he did it. No, he's not, because the poetry and the pictures are worth thousands upon thousands of words that are much more valuable.
Shapes the soul in a different way.
Oh, a wholly different way. So what he actually intends, especially in Genesis 1 and 2, in the type of genre that's utilized is actually perfect and for our benefit, because it tells us exactly what we need to know and helps us actually avoid some of the minutia details that we ask that are actually not, that help us miss the point.
You see this
Or lead us
elsewhere
to miss
too.
the
Like
point.
I can't help but think of Hebrews 11 in the Hall of Faith chapter, but at the beginning of that, in Hebrews 11:3, it actually says, by faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen is made from things that are not visible. The whole point is, in this long chapter where he's exhorting to this kind of faith, he doesn't give the specifics. He says that it was made by the word of God, that is through Christ. Is that is the most important category, is that the Father makes through the Son by the Spirit. And he's like, don't miss this.
Out of nothing.
Out of
Right? This is
nothing,
what the old theologians refer to as ex nihilo, right? As out of nothing, God himself spoke and powerfully brought into being things that did not exist prior.
Yeah, so that answers the how question, which is
right.
one of the big ones that Genesis 1 wants us to ask and answer.
Yep.
So
So we get who and how.
The what question? Yeah, who? You get who, which is most important. That's verse 1. You get how as soon as you get to verse 3. He speaks.
Yep.
It happens. You get the what. And it's interesting how much of Genesis 1 and 2 and
Whatness.
3 focus on
Whatness.
a lot of the things that God made. On this day, these things. On this day, these things. On this day, these things. It goes into a lot of detail. And then
What are some of those things, Doug?
Oh gosh, I mean, you get land and sea and sky.
Yep.
So you have like a 3-tiered world, and then within those you get these creatures that live in each of those respective spheres or domains that have some kind of majesty, glory, power, even to live and move and have their being within those spheres. You've got fish and the waters and sea monsters.
Again,
as
the
mentioned.
goodness of distinction and hierarchy, to your point.
There's a Hebrew word there that's used, sea monsters, and so people get weird with that, and they're like, "See, I told you, Nessie's real," and I'm like, "Well, probably not. We think we would have found her by now with all the tech we've got."
But you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
I mean,
It
have you ever
doesn't say Nessie, but I'm
I'm
pretty sure we have movies every single year about sea monsters.
I know.
And we're scared to go out on boats.
There's
So
things
let's
in there
let's
monstrous enough that I'm not trying to hang out
that's all
down there.
I'm
but
saying.
that's-
Megalodon
this is all
existed.
relative. This
Megalodon
is all
existed.
relative.
That's monster enough.
The Meg.
The Meg was hyperbolic. Let's just get that out
Just
there.
saying.
You ever
I've
seen
never
the
seen that
Jason
movie.
Statham taking out a Meg with the jet skis. That's not going to happen.
That's ridiculous. I missed that one.
But God made megalodons.
He did.
There's no doubt. He made the universe, space.
Sure.
The final frontier. He's made that as well.
Heaven's frontier.
Stars, all the planets, moon, sun. I mean, how expansive, and yet God that's how much bigger than the creation God is. He just spoke all this beautiful.
And then on the
differentiation.
6th and final day, the last thing he makes, right? Human beings, creatures of the late 6th day, the only things uniquely made in his image. We'll talk more about that later. And then we see, hey, chapter 2 goes into more detail
right.
on how he's putting them in a specific place with a specific purpose, and how he made humanity. It's almost like it double clicks on the
Notice
folder.
he doesn't double click on any of the other categories.
No.
To your point, he
double
intentionally double clicks on humanity.
and
That's
says, let me tell you how I made humanity. Male, female. Let me show you all their differences. Let me show you how they fit together. Let me show you why they're different, how they're different. Then you get marriage by the end of that chapter. I mean, the things it focuses on are different than I think what a lot of people would have focused on if they were writing Genesis 1 and 2.
That's great. Even to the point of thinking about how important that is of how the double click in chapter 2 is. You might say that all of creation is a grand stage to display all the glory of the Creator, but then also to drive home what is most important in that creation, and that is the relationship with His people that He created to enjoy His glory, to delight in Him, and to worship Him. All that's part of the whatness. So a lot of times we get lost in all the grand creation and everything that's there, but ultimately it actually has a much more specific what to it, which is God created a people for Himself to enjoy Him, and that's why it narrows in on how important that
Well,
is.
it dignifies humanity to such a great deal that you can look at all of the megalodon. You can look at Mount Everest. You can look at the Grand Canyon. You can look at the ocean and outer space and all these things, and then recognize that none of those things, God didn't decide to double click on any of those things.
That's right.
That He turns in chapter 2 to talk about humanity and His relationship with them, and it gives you great joy. It's worship inducing. It's awe inducing. It also is humbling in a sense, and exalting at the same time, where you're like, wow, that's what we were made for. Like God actually, it's not sentimental to say God cares for us and He has a big purpose for us.
Well, that's
Because He
right.
does.
No. Yeah, nor is it narcissistic or self-focused.
Exactly.
It's the God who made us ultimately puts us in that relationship at the center stage in a lot of ways. Even all the angels that He's created that just cry out constantly and serve at His side continuously. Ultimately, still, humanity's a stronger focus.
Yeah,
what the relationship that the human beings have with God, even in terms of redemption, the angels long to look into these things.
It's true.
It's significant.
1 Peter 1.
Yeah, that's a helpful picture, thinking of Genesis 1 as the setting of a stage for this drama to unfold, that the central feature of the story of the Scriptures, as it's not seeking to answer every question, it is the story of God's relationship with mankind front and center. And so I think think what we've been saying is Christians need to have a lot of confidence when they come to the scriptures to let the Bible speak on its own terms. I think a lot of bad theology, bad exegesis is born out of insecurity, a lack of Christian confidence, where we see some challenge to the scriptures or some skepticism about the scriptures, and then we run in acting like everybody deserves an answer on their own terms, when God actually never works that way.
Right.
Like God doesn't answer every question. God doesn't recognize everybody as a good faith conversation partner. And so sometimes it's like, even the book of Job. Job is a righteous dude. He's suffering. He's trusting God. And God comes in the very end and still doesn't give him any answers. He said, hey, well, where were you?
He puts him in his place, to your point. I mean, that's what Genesis 1 does. I mean, we really struggle with that post-fall, and especially in the U.S. context, because we think that actually we're the sinner, not God. And so with the center, puts man in his place. There is a God who created everything and us, and we are not him. So our posture coming to God is not constituent of accusation, questioning. We don't put God in the dock and put him on trial. We are merely his to actually bow at his feet and worship him no matter what, because he's the one who made us.
Yeah, that's right. When you look at like Revelation chapter 4, verse 11, passages like that, whenever God is attributed so much glory and honor and being worthy of praise, all the time, scriptures go to two places. One is our redemption in Jesus, that he sent his son for us. But the primary place it starts, verse 11 in chapter 4 of Revelation, is, worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things. And by your will they existed and were created. And so at the end of the day, if God has created us, then he is entitled to everything. Yeah. All glory, all honor, all deference, all listening ear. And if a servant that is faithful like Job doesn't necessarily get the answers that he's looking for, how much more so the opponents who are coming to the scriptures saying in their hearts, as fools always do, there is no God. Yep. And God doesn't always give the answers that they're looking for. He speaks on his own terms. He speaks,
and he gives us the answers we actually need.
Right, exactly.
Is ultimately us trying to discern and have an account that is to our liking, is putting ourselves in the place of God. When he answers Job, he says, you're not understanding who I am and who you are. Let's get that straight. Where were you when it all went down? Oh, since you weren't there, do you realize yet who you're talking to?
That's right.
And the fact that I'm even condescending to actually care for you in this conversation is a huge act of grace towards you.
Yes, sir.
So let's lovingly let me care for you, since I'm God and you're not.
There's a movie that makes this point very powerfully. I think I've mentioned it from the stage once, but it's called Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. And the movie starts off with a woman receiving a letter that one of her sons has been killed in war. And she begins to doubt her faith, doubt the existence of God, question his character really more than anything else. And she asks the question that Job asks, basically, how could you let this happen? Then the screen fades to black, and words from the Bible show up on this Hollywood movie where God says from the book of Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? And the morning stars sang out for joy. And then all of a sudden you see
montage
planets come into existence and galaxies.
So
and
the orchestral
nebula.
music is playing.
Oh my gosh, this
It's
woman
kind of
is
that Willy
singing.
Wonka scene in there a little bit.
This woman starts singing. There's this operatic thing.
else.
I remember watching it for the very first time with my wife, and as you're watching God create the universe, it's 26 minutes of no speech, just music, showing how everything was made. I remember at one point, I'm getting deeply moved, so choked up, and I look over and tears are just streaming down my wife's face. It's a very powerful illustration of what it might have felt like for Job
Did you
in
guys see that in
conversation with the
IMAX?
Lord. I wish I had. If it ever comes to IMAX, I'll pay $100 to see it.
It's also, part of what you're highlighting is like this is such familiar terrain, because for the Christians, you have the scriptures. And so, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Yeah. If you're not a Christian, you have some other theory of our origins. You just, for the most part, take on faith because you weren't there. And
that's
it's like,
right.
there it is. But I feel there have been a couple of times where I feel like God has graced me with an opportunity to inhabit the question, where did this come from? Almost from within the headspace of somebody who doesn't know. Like, I know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's right.
But I remember being, I was working with Campus Crusade. I was on the West Coast. I remember sitting on the top of this hill, kind of looking out, and there were a bunch of hills. And way deep down at the bottom, there's this road, these little small cars passing around. And almost, for the first time ever, I had that thought, where did this come from? And I knew the answer, but my imagination was able to process that question like somebody who doesn't know. And this is such a huge question. Like if you're not a Christian, you have to wrestle with this question. I mean, you look down at your hand and you wiggle your fingers and know that your brain is sending signals to tell your fingers to move. The fact that I'm making noises with my mouth
and they're intelligible to us.
And you guys know what's going on in my heart, my soul, my mind. It's like, where did that come from? Like these are not small things. And so when you get even a cinematic portrayal of God making everything, it's a powerful portrayal because it's a powerful question, a powerful answer. And everybody just has to do business with it. That's why the scriptures start from page 1 with that question, with that answer. One of the other important things that we're told from the very beginning of the creation account is regarding our first parents. We'll discuss the image of God and the doctrine of humanity in later episodes. But why is it important to hold to a historical Adam? So for instance, I remember the first time I bumped into some literature in a theological library that was making the case that, Adam and Eve can be helpful, even if they're just kind of a parable for humanity's purpose and problem, And I was like, well, what? I don't know about that. But could they be helpful just as a parable? Do they have to be historical figures?
No, not helpful as merely a parable. Yes, historical figures for a lot of reasons. But before we get into some of the theological implications of what you lose if that's not true, you've got the fact that the Bible itself treats them as historical figures. So Moses does, obviously, first 5 books of the Bible written by Moses. Jesus does.
Matthew 19.
And he doesn't just quote the book of Moses. He quotes the book of Moses and says, God said that. It's one of my favorite verses.
It's kind of an intellectual integrity that's required.
And then Paul, of course, Romans 5, when explaining how everything went wrong with the world, lays the blame at the feet of a real person named Adam.
And his goal is not to give an abstract account. He's actually trying to give the mechanics of how sin and death and corruption actually have spread throughout the world in such a way that it requires a historical person in order to make the whole argument he's making stand.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me, he says the same, Romans 5, the logic is also present in 1 Corinthians 15, which we think about that passage a lot for the resurrection. But what he says in verse 21 is, since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead also comes through a man. He's saying, if this, then this. And so to your point about what you lose, it's, I remember, I don't think it's original to me, but I've said it in sermons before. There's people like, that's not fair that I get Adam's imputed guilt. That's not fair.
I wasn't there. I didn't do it.
Exactly. I'm like, well, you better be very thankful for Adam's imputed guilt, because it's the same mechanics by which you get Christ's imputed righteousness. And so that the necessity of the historical Adam is directly connected to, in its parallel in those ways that the bodily resurrection of Jesus, the real person of Jesus, the life that he lived, the death and the resurrection, is paralleled to, in 1 Corinthians 15, Romans 5, and other places, the life, sin, and failure of. That's why sometimes you hear us use the language of the first Adam and the second Adam, that there's a new humanity in Christ as the first humanity fell in Adam. So that parallel means that you don't want to lose the Adam, because if you do, you lose the second Adam as well.
Yeah, it's a way of saying, another way of saying that is that in passages like Romans 5, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul gives Adam the same kind of historical space that he gives Jesus.
Right.
And so however historical Jesus must be in order for our Christian worldview to stand up, that's how historical Adam must be, because he's putting him on the same kind of footing to say this, we have this first Adam and this last Adam.
That's right, yeah. The other thing it's worth bringing in the conversation, and you have to let it air out a little bit, is the only reason we really struggle a little bit with this is because of extreme godless indoctrination. Extreme godless indoctrination. As you're sitting here pointing out how God has so crafted us that our minds and our souls are so psychosomatically unified, and we're so fearfully and wonderfully made that what we think activates our hands. All we have to do is look in the mirror properly and say, this is not a cosmic oozed accident over a long period of time. You have to be so indoctrinated into that foolish way of thinking to actually struggle with the fact that God created humanity, Adam and Eve, in a special way. This is why Psalm 14:1 says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And you have to be an utter fool to think that all of a sudden humanity and all of its brilliance, all of its image bearing, all of its likeness to God somehow just happened, that you were just a random occurrence with no meaning in a cosmic accident. You have to be indoctrinated over your lifetime to actually struggle with what is very apparent by just looking at human beings. just looking. And therefore, you're not going to struggle. If he made us, of course, he made Adam and Eve. The scriptures are unequivocal in those. The struggle with it is we think that actually somehow this demonic indoctrination from so-called scientism outside of under God's world has the right narrative, has the right story that we actually should be heeding. And it's actually the other way around, is that blinds us to the truth of who God is as the creator. And therefore, it leads us to actually struggle with what just is apparent, just apparent.
Yeah, and we'll see so much in coming episodes about why it is important to understand our first parents, who they were, that God created them, our relationship to us, our relationship to them, and all that affects in life in this world. But just a reminder today that this world is not an accident. God created all things, but also you're not an accident. If you're listening to this, God continues to sustain his world and make fresh human beings, and you're one of them. He made you in love and intends you to walk with him. So draw near to your Creator. He loves you. If we draw near to God, he will draw near to us. And so
amazing.
We'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Group Chat Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and check out the links below if you're interested in more. Until next time, grace and peace.